scary stories. Before we get into today's stories, if you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's get into today's video. So, I've posted on this forum twice before, once about a really weird guy who latched himself onto me during college, and once about my stalker, the situation that went on for years. This is the third and final thing that happened during that time. Seriously, all three situations overlapped, and I was just like, I must be doing something wrong in my life. But anyway, on to the story. So this was really before catfishing became a term we used, though the act itself has been around as long as social media has. This was back during my freshman year of college, and it was during the MySpace era. In college, I made friends with someone in my honors curriculum class, Leslie, and she in return introduced me to many of her other friends, who then became my friends. They'd all known each other for years, but were very welcoming to me, and I felt very much like part of the group. That being said, I didn't really know them that well when this happened. What they did seemed, well, not like them. But then I realized I didn't exactly know what was like them. A member of the group, Katrina, was going away to school in Boston, and so the night before we all decided to have a going away party of sorts. We were going to visit another friend, Tamara, who was going to school in Philadelphia, which was about an hour away, and then we were going to just have fun in the city. Our designated meeting place to drive down there was Dunkin' Donuts. When I got there, Leslie was there with our friends Samantha and Anthony, and Leslie looked pissed off. She was sitting there with her arms crossed, kind of staring at nothing, but with an angry look on her face. As for Anthony and Samantha, they kept looking at the door, and they seemed both nervous and shifty. I could tell they were on edge. I sat down at the table of awkwardness, since we had to wait on Katrina and a couple of more friends, and things got awkward. When no one was talking, I was just like, "What's the deal with you there?" Leslie replied, "You should ask them," gesturing to them again, and they both went from looking guilty to anxious and mildly scared. I looked to the door and saw just a normal guy, pretty nondescript. When he walked in, he just kind of glanced around the room, like he was looking for someone. Anthony and Samantha wouldn't say anything. Leslie just kept huffing and shaking her head, and all three kept looking over at this guy as he sat down. As soon as Katrina and the others got there, it was like we couldn't get out of there fast enough. Katrina, our friends Evan and Julie, and I were so confused. It was on the way to Philadelphia that we learned the truth. It was Leslie who told us apparently Anthony and Samantha had created a fake MySpace account, and they had been catfishing this guy, Calvin. We didn't know the term catfishing yet, but that's what it was. They had created a fake account using a picture of an actress or singer or something, I can't remember. Only her face was obscure. Apparently this had been going on for a couple of weeks, and the conversation had gotten serious, like Calvin seemed to really like this fake girl that they had created. I didn't know why they did this, and when I asked them, they didn't really have a reason. Mostly they were just bored. It turned out that they had told him to meet at the Dunkin' Donuts at the time that we were there. I think that once he showed up, Anthony and Samantha realized that this wasn't just a game, that Calvin was a real person with real feelings, and I do think that they felt badly about the whole thing that they had done, but it was too late. They couldn't take it back. There was no reason they had chosen Calvin, and he was just a random guy that they picked. I guess Leslie had found out about it a couple of days prior and told them to end it, and that was why she was so angry at them, because they had told her what had happened, that Calvin was supposed to be there. After that, I never really saw Anthony and Samantha in the same way. These weren't really people that I wanted to be friends with, especially when I saw the message and saw how much they had gotten Calvin to like him. I thought that this would be the end of it, and I was wrong. About a week later, everyone came to my house for pizza and just to hang out. Samantha and Anthony told us that they had gotten messages from Calvin. I didn't think much of it because I already knew he had been messaging their fake account, wanting to know why she had stood him up, and he seemed upset, especially when this fake girl stopped replying. But no, that's not what Samantha and Anthony meant. He hadn't messaged the fake account. He had messaged their accounts. I remember them telling me that my sharp intake of breath, the way my heart rate increased, the unnerved me. The messages were more of the same, but also Calvin made it clear he knew what they had done, and he seemed even angrier. Anthony, in particular, got a very long, furious message from Calvin. I don't want to say that I thought they deserved it, but honestly, they had done a shitty thing, and there were some consequences. I figured it would die down in a couple of days. It did not. A few days later, Calvin had messaged Anthony and Samantha. He started messaging the rest of us who had been in Dunkin' Donuts that night. Now, this really scared me. Keep in mind that I was already dealing with my other stalker situation, so I was understandably on edge, and this guy had found me. I didn't know much about computers, but I thought he must have traced Anthony and Samantha's IP address or something, since they had used their own computers for that account. But when it came to the rest of us, we didn't understand how he had found us. My theory is that once he found Anthony and Samantha, he looked through their friends and recognized us from our pictures, but I don't know for sure. All of his messages came on MySpace, so at least he wasn't texting us and stuff, but still, his messages were very angry. He kept saying things like, "How could you do this to me? And you made a fool of me. How dare you?" I thought about replying, but Evan had done that already, telling Calvin that we weren't responsible and he didn't believe him. Honestly, Evan totally sold Anthony and Samantha out, but we figured Calvin already knew they were the ringleaders. He just didn't know they were the sole perpetrators. Instead, thinking we all had a hand in it, I figured there was no point to defend myself since Calvin didn't believe Evan when he had tried. This went on for a couple of weeks, and it seemed like Calvin was getting increasingly angry the more we ignored him, because that's what he said we were doing. Finally, I had had enough and just was like, "For fuck's sake," I replied, and told him again that we weren't responsible, collaborating Evan's story. I didn't actually put all of that blame on Anthony and Samantha, but I told Calvin that it was just a couple of people in the group. Then I apologized, though I think that only made him angrier. He didn't believe anything we said, so I blocked him. We all did, but he just kept making new accounts. In 2 weeks, he probably made 3 different profiles, in addition to the one he had had at the beginning. When I finally defended myself, Calvin messaged me back and said, "You made a fool out of me, an idiot, and one day you'll know how that feels. I think you will." Maybe it was because of everything else that had happened with this guy, but that sounded like a threat, like he was going to personally make sure I knew how we had made him feel. We were lucky. As far as I know, Calvin didn't do anything beyond messaging us very aggressively. It could have been a lot worse, like it was with my other stalker and me. Eventually Calvin stopped messaging us, and then he deleted his account. I felt bad for this guy, and Samantha and Anthony had been wrong, but what Calvin was doing was just as wrong too, the harassment. Eventually he had stopped, and I never saw him again. I slowly drifted apart from the group, first Anthony and Samantha for obvious reasons, then Katrina, then Julie, Evan, and Leslie. I wasn't too broken up about the first two because they weren't the kind of people I really wanted to be friends with. Not only had they done a shitty thing, they had brought Calvin into our lives, like opening a door and inviting someone in. So this story takes place about 10 years ago, when I was around 15 or so. I was the new kid in town. I'd moved to some small town in the middle of fucking nowhere. I can't tell you the town's name for safety reasons. Anyway, I didn't have any friends, and then one day I met this really cool guy standing outside of the store. His name was Jeremiah. I told him that that was a cool name. He informed me that his mother had given him the name after the weeping prophet from the Bible, and that his mother was very Christian, and that he had stopped caring about religion a long time ago. I was in the same boat as Jeremiah. I used to believe in God and go to church and was baptized, etc. And then my dad died, and I lost faith in everything. Jeremiah took advantage of this. He became sort of like a father/big brother figure to me. He taught me how to do all kinds of things. He gave me confidence and even helped me step up my game and dress better. In less than a month, I'd gone from being a complete nobody that no one gave a fuck about, and no one even knew I existed, to having over 35 friends and girls that were DTF on speed dial. These new friends referred to themselves as homeboys. Now at the time I didn't know what it meant to be a homeboy. I later found out that it was loosely affiliated with prison and gang culture. And in case you don't know, a homeboy is just what it sounds like. It is a friend or acquaintance that is given permission to leave and enter your home and use your things, and you basically share everything, and you must be down to ride or die at a moment's notice, or you'll lose your homeboy status and be reduced to a fuckboy, and depending on how gangsta your group really is, you could possibly be killed. And this is exactly what happened to one boy that was in our group. Chuck was a cool dude. He sold weed and sometimes hard drugs, and was very nice, despite being a gang member. I know it seems hard to believe, but not all gangs are filled with violent idiots. Some gangs are for protection, or sort of like an organization that creates opportunity where there is none. One night Jeremiah had beaten his girlfriend to near death, and he had come to Chuck's house to hide out from the cops. Chuck had found out, and him and Jeremiah had gotten into a fight. I didn't know it at the time, but Jeremiah's girlfriend was Chuck's cousin. Chuck beat Jeremiah's ass. Jeremiah called me a few days later, high as fuck from a crack binge, and told me that we were going to kill Chuck. He wanted me to help him, and if I didn't, then I'd be next. I tried to tell Jeremiah to just let it go, and that I wasn't a killer, and that I don't want to go to prison for the rest of my life. He said alright, and said that he'd drop it, which I thought that he had. He invited me over to his house to get high and play video games, and just chill with these other two girls he had there. Now, I must add, despite the fact that these two girls were crackheads, they were not ugly or trashy like you'd think they'd be. These were upper middle class preppy type girls with expensive clothes, and they didn't pick at themselves, etc. Kiki, one of the crackhead girls, was telling me and Jeremiah that she wanted to kill her father and that he was a pedophile. and all kinds of other fucked up shit, and that was the reason why she smoked crack. Jeremiah ended up dating this girl, and about a month later I saw a news report that Kiki's father had been shot 10 times in the middle of the night, and it turned out that Kiki wasn't in fact lying. Her father really was a pedophile. Kiki had told both Jeremiah and I that he molested her up until the age of 16 and then lost interest in her after her sister was born. Kiki had gotten her sister taken away early on before her father could do anything, which enraged her father. He literally would go into Kiki's room and beat the hell out of her and back while she was asleep. Now at this point you're probably starting to see Jeremiah as some kind of hero, but remember earlier about how he wanted to kill Chuck? Jeremiah and Kiki had gotten into a fight and Kiki went and had sex with Chuck, and Jeremiah found out. He shot both Kiki and Chuck. But it gets worse. As Kiki was laying on the ground bleeding out and suffering from lead poisoning from being shot, Jeremiah took it upon himself to assault her, and in one final breath, before dying, Chuck fired his gun and hit Jeremiah. They all just laid on the ground dead, and blood was everywhere. Or at least I thought they were all dead. Kiki survived, and is now a nurse and has stopped using drugs. As for her friend, no one knows what had happened to her. Kiki and I are strangely still friends. And as for me, I have left that old life behind. So kids, be careful who you make friends with. Sometimes it's probably better to have no friends. I never wanted to be exposed to any of the shit I was exposed to, but I'm thankful that I made it out alive. And I've even started going back to church and reading the Bible. I still struggle to maintain belief in God, or anything really. This happened a few months ago, but as I was reading through some of these stories I thought I would share. I'm from the Bay Area in California, and I never learned to drive, so I took the public transport every day, pre-COVID. I know this story sounds a little out there, but if you have ever been on BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, you know all of the crazy types of people you can run into. This is where I first encountered a neckbeard. I'll call him Coffee Beard. I was sitting on the train on my way to the doctor's appointment. My boyfriend had agreed to meet up with me and kill time before it started, so we agreed to meet at the station. I usually stare out the windows and space out, but from the corner of my eye, I could see someone staring at me. He sat across the train car, was probably about 19, and looked like he hadn't showered in a month. He didn't match the stereotypical neckbeard look. He wasn't overweight and wasn't wearing a fedora, but his hair was greasy, and he looked grimy. I brushed off the staring at first as I was sitting in front of a window, but any time I looked across the car, I could see him staring directly at me. I figured nothing would come of it, but when I got off at my stop, he followed and came directly up to me. He immediately told me I was beautiful and asked if I had a boyfriend. I said I did, and he asked for his name, obviously not believing in me. I told him my boyfriend's name and tried to keep walking down the stairs to the exit gates, but he followed. "Oh, your boyfriend's name was on my Starbucks cup this morning." I had no idea what he was talking about, so I just kept walking and hoped that he would leave me alone. He did not. As I walked down the stairs to the exit gates, I thought I had lost him, but when I saw him quickly rushing down the stairs after me, I was about to exit, and the stairs were above me, so he was looking down at me about 4 feet above me. "Can I get your number? You're a goddess." I was kinda surprised and have some issues about not being good at confrontation for fear of being rude. I'm working on it. So for some reason I decided to tell him no instead of just walking away. Finally, I got off of the exit gates and began to walk down the steps to the street. Halfway down, he appears at the top and starts yelling to talk to me again. He asks for my Snapchat. I tell him I don't use it and try to keep walking, but he continues to follow. Eventually, I end up giving him my Instagram just to get him to leave me alone. But he doesn't remember his account name, so he has me follow one of his friends instead. As soon as I get onto the street, I decide to walk a few blocks and hide out in a corner store in case he followed me again. I don't see him again that day. Unfollow his friend on Instagram and text my friends laughing about my first neckbeard encounter. When I met up with my boyfriend, I told him the full story as well. I figured that would be the end of Coffeebeard, but I was so very wrong. On Valentine's Day, me and my boyfriend decided to go into San Francisco and spend the day milling around and going to thrift stores. When it's time to go home, we walk to the nearest BART station. We called an Uber to the station since San Francisco is big and can be a little hard to navigate on foot. And I'm first out of the car since my boyfriend had to wait for the traffic to die down before getting out of the car. I'm a little ways down the block when I pause to wait for him near a street corner. I hear someone yelling, but it's San Francisco, so I assume it has nothing to do with me. Boy, oh boy, was I wrong. I look at the person yelling, who's now motioning towards me, and there he is, Coffeebeard. My boyfriend, who Coffeebeard definitely didn't believe existed, catches up to me pretty quick. Just as I finally recognize Coffeebeard as the creepy guy on BART, I make some comment like, "Oh, you're the guy from BART," so my boyfriend will know this is the creep who followed me. Coffeebeard tells me it's his birthday, so I say congratulations and turn my attention elsewhere, hoping he'll leave me alone. Obviously, we can see how great that had worked for me in the past, and once again he continues trying to talk to me. When that doesn't work, he tries to insult my boyfriend. I think he tried to criticize his style, which is ironic because it's one I share and one Coffeebeard had complimented me on in previous encounters. He tries to start a fight with my boyfriend before the light finally turned green and we were able to escape Coffeebeard once and for all.